Gamers of the world, welcome to the video. I'm GetGoodGuy and this is Battlefield 5, and I recently made a video detailing my best guns for each class after the TTK changes, which I have linked to in the description if you haven't seen it and you want to take a look. And so the obvious follow-up to that is a video about the worst guns for each class after the changes. Now this isn't as useful from a playing perspective of course, but it helps to lay out some of the flaws evident from DICE's recent update, an update which I personally find confusing overall and has both positives and negative aspects. The intention apparently was to increase weapon diversity, and yet I think most now feel there is a narrower selection of optimal weapons. So of course this means some weapons got destroyed by these changes. Perhaps some of the weapons you previously enjoyed, although further tweaks to the update are incoming at some point we believe. So check the date this video was released and compare it with the actual date you're watching it at in order to gain some context. Now if you want to get straight to the list, please use the timestamp shown on screen now. I know some people have shorter attention spans, so if that's you, then absolutely skip ahead. But if you want full coverage of the issue at hand, the logic with which I made my selections and other relevant details, stick with me here. So this is as always just my opinion, laid out for entertainment, with the idea being that you then leave your list below so we can all compare and contrast what we do and don't like. This list I'm presenting is not an official definitive list of course, none of them are, however, it is thoroughly researched, using in-depth stats, information from some very knowledgeable people involved with sim.gg, and my own personal experiences. Statistically, these weapons are now objectively poor, and I can't possibly recommend them for optimal performance. Also, keep in mind that most weapons are now at least somewhat easier to use in terms of controlling recoil and such like, and pretty much all weapons can do a decent job when used within their intended range. That's a pretty obvious statement. And then furthermore, a pretty able player can make pretty much any weapon look good. It doesn't necessarily make them good of course when compared with other options, so please consider all of that when you're watching today. And here we go, into the assault class first to kick off my worst guns post TTK update. And I've selected the M1907 SF. Now I could have gone for the Braider here, and I very nearly did, as the Braider is now a 5 to 6 bullet kill weapon when hitting the body, but it fires a 4 round burst, meaning you need at least 2 bursts to center mass to kill someone, and it's quite feasible to need 3, 4 or more depending upon enemy movement and range. Basically it sucks now, and the only reason I haven't selected it as the worst option for assault is because it has a secondary semi-auto fire mode, and a semi-auto, even a bad one, is able to shine to a certain degree in BF5 due to the map and mode design. Now if a secondary fire mode isn't good enough for you personally, then I think it's totally reasonable to have it as your worst option in the assault class now. But for me, this honor goes to the aforementioned M1907 SF, and that's because it's now essentially an SMG but without the ability to constantly self-heal. Most SMGs took a real battering with this update, now only really being viable within a pretty limited close range. The somewhat mitigating factor being that they're pretty good there, generally, at least to a certain degree, some of them, and and you can heal after each fight, keeping up your tempo, maintaining aggression, and providing the ability to break enemy lines and revive your allies. Now with DICE having basically stated that they've made the M1907 an SMG for the assault class, a player with a fairly strong knowledge of in-depth gameplay balancing aspects will likely question why anyone would reasonably select it, with performance in mind. Because while it does have a very quick time to kill at close range, beating out the Suomi and the Thompson, but only when they don't have light bolt I believe, and it does kill a bit faster at outer ranges than some SMGs, plus being fun, well it's now almost totally inferior to an actual SMG medic in most ways. You push in with the M1907, you win a fight or two, have no more heals of your own, and stand at basically a total disadvantage when compared with someone using an actual SMG. Personally, I would have liked to have seen the M1907 maintain a bit more range power than it currently has, perhaps with an ever so slightly nerfed super close range time to kill, in order to maintain some kind of balance and differentiate it from SMGs a little, and also just give it a range where it's advantageous to select. But instead we get this, a gun which is actually only better than the STG for kill time out to 12 meters, and then gets totally dominated from there on out. And while I enjoyed using it, especially as it feels very stable considering how fast it's firing, I just can't recommend it. And so that's why it's my selection for the worst gun in the assault class after the initial TTK changes. Okay, next up when we come to the medic class, in which I've selected the MP28, and this one pains me, it really does, because this was an SMG that I got around to actually properly using quite late on, and I really enjoyed it. It was so much fun for me and I found it to be very strong when used properly, but now, well it's pretty baffling from a balancing standpoint, because it has the same damage model as the Thompson, but fires at least 50 rounds per minute slower. In fact, it kills more slowly than the incredibly easy to use Sten, at which point you really do have to question why bother selecting it for pure performance. This update has made it an objectively bad weapon choice, and I did enjoy using it for this footage, and I did do pretty well, but even then, I could tell while I was using it that I'd have been far better off with a vast array of other weapons. This was usually my hipfire choice before the update, but with the time to kill slower than the Sten, some hipfire stats actually being worse than the Sten, while the hipfire stats it beats it on aren't really to a large enough degree, and being destroyed by the Sten for spread and reload stats, well, it's just a bit sad really. I don't know what the intention was behind how the MP28 is now balanced and designed. I mean, you still have the EMP as an option, the Type 100, or you've got the Thompson and the Suomi for raw time to kill, the MAB 38 if you want range, or the option to just use a bolt action carbine as a medic for true versatility and range capability. Basically, the MP28 is left embarrassed now, and I really hope it doesn't stay that way, but for now, that's why it's my selection for the worst gun in the medic class after the TTK changes. Okay, onwards, and we come to the support class, and I'm sure this won't come as much of a surprise to many of you. I've gone for the FG42, a weapon that had a specific role before these changes, an LMG option that could be used at close range and dominated at closer mid-range, if you had solid aim. An LMG that provided a different feel for an often quite passive support class. An LMG that's now a shadow of its former self. I've just talked about how bad the MP28 is. Well, the FG42 for raw time to kill is actually fairly similar to it, out to around 15 to 20 meters, just about beating it out, and with no ability to self-heal, although you do have the ability to resupply your ammo, and you're gonna need that, because this gun requires between 5 and 13 bullets to kill, actually the exact same damage model at all ranges as the MP28, meaning it's an LMG with an SMG damage model, and I believe the only reason it kills faster than the MP28 is due to high bullet velocity, which is pretty ridiculous, especially, and this is where the reloads come in, considering that the FG42 only has 20 rounds in the magazine. The MP28 can have 50 with an extended mag. In a lot of ways, my worst gun for the medic class absolutely stomps all over my worst gun for the support class. Now sure, the FG42 has a bipod, but at that point it needs to of course be compared with the other LMGs, and the LS26 is a great example, because even with a lower rate of fire, it has a far superior time to kill, and even though the FG42 beats it out for some specific stats, well, BF5 is a game in which it's pretty easy to aim and overall just use almost all weapons. It's not demanding in terms of gun skill, and so with overall ease of use in mind, the LS26 just walks all over the FG42. And with even that said, if you want to contest up close, again you may as well just use an SMG so you can heal, or the STG of the assault class for overall versatility, or even a semi-auto or bolt action carbine for mid-range capabilities, or we could even go as far as saying the Madsen to at least have a 6 bullet kill consistently. I think you get the point. In a class that got heavily smacked up by the update, the FG42 somehow finds a way to be significantly worse than any other gun in there, and so it's my choice for the worst weapon in the support class after the TTK changes. And now obviously we close with the recon class, and I thought I was basically going to end up saying there is no specifically weaker option for this class, until I remembered a weapon I'd totally forgotten about, and it became a very easy choice. It's the P08 carbine. Why? Because the trench carbine exists is a good point, and everything else in the class slaps up the P08 when it comes to range, not to mention a ton of weapons in this game beating it at mid-range and in close quarters, and the extra difficulty involved in actually making the gun competitive isn't worth it either. For example, the Sten actually has a faster optimal time to kill than the P08, out to like 75 meters, and the Sten is fully automatic, and so with the P08 carbine, you have to be pulling the trigger at a rate of 360 rounds per minute to even achieve the optimal time to kill, when you could just use an automatic weapon which can kill faster anyway. So while it does have a faster optimal time to kill than the trench carbine, in reality it likely doesn't for the vast majority of players, as you can set the trench carbine to be fully automatic and then just spray away. And while the P08 has better accuracy, again if you do actually want range, just basically use anything else in the recon class. It's just not a good option. I imagine there will be a very small player base who really connect with it, and it's just right for them. And that's good, that's great, but for literally everyone else, just don't bother. I mean, you've got things like the MAS44 and the Turner of the assault class, which also fire at 360 RPM and do higher damage per bullet. And so for me, all of that is why the P08 carbine is the worst weapon in the recon class after the TTK changes. And so, that's my overall list of the worst guns for every class right now. Hopefully some tweaks will see them buffed up a bit soon, and now leave me your lists in the comments below, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leaving a like would be seriously appreciated. Subscribe and turn on notifications to catch my future content, and feel free to follow my stream and join my Discord server in the description and my pinned comment. Here's the Board of Awesome for the epic people who support the channel on Patreon. They're all absolute heroes, and I love them all deeply and of course, often. If you want to join them on the Board of Awesome, the link to the Patreon page is in the description and my pinned comment. And with all that said, I'm GetGoodGuy, and I'll see you next time. Laters. For the recon class, in terms of looking at the numbers, which is a near total reversal of where we used to be. Now I must say that the anti-material rifles, like the Boys AT rifle, is actually probably the best statistical choice, because a one-shot body shot kill within 100 meters is just broken now. It's kind of ridiculous to me that that wasn't changed, at least reined in just a little bit,